In this lesson, we're going to be creating a user model that we'll be using to secure our application. So to get started, let's switch over to our editor. And we want to open up our models file, and we're going to create a new model under the reminder model. So we'll go down 2 lines, and we'll define our class for our model. We'll call it user, and that's going to inherit the DB model base class. And we'll just grab the ID field up from here. There we go. We'll hit save. So our users are going to have an ID primary key, which is fine. And we have a couple other fields that we'll need to define as well. Now, because this application is only being created for personal use, it's not going to be, we're not doing register fields, or rather register forms or anything like that. What we're going to do is we're just going to have our user model. We're going to create our user on the command line. And then we're going to create a login page that'll allow us to log in and out of our application. So for our user information, let's create a field for email. So we'll go DB column, and this is going to be a string field, and we'll limit it to 75 characters, which is pretty reasonable for an email address. And then we'll go unique, make sure we spell it right, there we go. Unique is equal to true. And that's just indicating that we don't want to be able to have more than one user with the same email address. So now we're going to go down a line and we'll create one more field. We'll call it password. This one's an obvious one. And we'll go DB column, DB string, and we'll make it 150 character limit, which should be fine. And then we'll hit save. So we've created our user model. Let's move over to our shell, and we'll check and see that the user model is working. And we also have to create our table as well. So we'll switch over to our shell. We're going to open a Flask shell. So we'll go Flask shell, and we want to check that the user object is there. And you'll see that it's not. Now this is because we haven't added it to our Flask shell context. So that's what we'll have to do next. So we'll go back to our editor, and we're going to go to our init file. Where is it? There we go. Our init file, and now we're going to import the user model from the models from the models module, and then we're going to want to pass it into our shell context. So we'll go user, set that to user. There we go. So that should give us access to the user model within our context. So if we go back over to our shell and we control D out and then reload it, check and see if user is there. Okay, looks like it is. So now we can move forward. So now that we've created a new model, we have to create the table for the model. And to do that, we can use the same method that we used previously to create our reminders table, which is the create all method, and I'll show you how that works. So we're going to use db, just check that it's there. Yeah, it looks good. And then we want to go db.createAll. Okay, so that looks like it succeeded. I didn't get any errors, which is great. So now let's just do a quick query to make sure that it did work. Query all. Okay, so we don't have any users, but it didn't error or anything like that, so it looks like the table was created and the model is working appropriately. So now let's switch over to our editor. The next thing we want to do is we want to go to our models file. We want to add some helper methods to our model. These methods are going to help us with authenticating a user when it comes time for that user to log in. So first we need to do some imports. So we'll go to the top of our file, and we'll go from workzug.security import generate password hash and generate, or rather check password hash. There we go. And then we're going to create a couple methods on our user model. The first one's going to be called set password. It's going to take 2 parameters, a self and also a password. There we go. And this is going to set the user object password equal to generate password hash, and then pass it the password that we're trying to set. And then we're going to go down, create another method, and this will be check password, which we're going to use to check existing passwords on login. So that'll take self as well, and it'll also take password. And this is going to return the check password hash method, or function rather, and we're going to have to pass 2 parameters to it. So it needs the password that you're comparing to, and then also the object assigned password. So we'll go self.password and then password. So let's just talk briefly about what we've done so far. We've imported 2 packages, generate password hash, check password hash, and both of them are coming from the WorkZug security library. Now, if you're not familiar with WorkZug, WorkZug is a WSGI utility library for Python, and Flask just leverages it and uses some of the functionality to handle request and response for the most part. So one of the bonuses of using WorkZug is that it provides some of these helper functions, which are great for things like security and session handling and things like that. So what we've done is we've imported those 2, and on our user model, we've created methods, one to set our password using the generate password hash function, and one to check our password, which is just to compare a provided password to a user's actual password. So the next step is to save this, and then we need to test that it's working. So let's switch over to our shell. And we want to create a user. So I'm going to restart our Flask shell. There we go. So let's create a user. So we'll create a variable. We'll call it user, and we'll make that equal to the user class instantiation, which is going to give us a user object. But we need to provide it with some parameters first. So we need an email address. We know that. So we'll go. I'll just go colin.morgan@fullbit.ca, and that should be all that we need for now. So we'll just hit enter, and now what we need to do is we need to set a password for our user. Now to do that, instead of just going user.password or providing a password parameter within the instantiation of the user object, we're going to use our set password method that we created. We're doing this because we don't want a raw string unencoded password in our database. We want it to be encrypted, and we want to use our generate hash or generate password hash function to do that. So what we'll do is we'll go user, and we'll go set password, and we'll just go password, and we'll hit enter. And if we went user.password, you can see that it's an encrypted string. It's taken the string password and it's encrypted it, and that should be a secure way to store our password. So now all that's left to do is to save our user. So let's go db session, add our user to the database session, and then we want to commit it. And that should add our user to the database. And just to test, we'll go user query all, and it should return 1 user. And there you go, you can see. And if we just went like this, you could go email, and you can see colin.morgan. So it looks like it worked. So let's control D out of here, and I'm just going to do a clear, and let's look at our git status, and we'll commit our changes. So we'll go git add git commit. And then we'll go added user model and auth methods. And there we go. Now, one thing I did forget was to test the check password method that we created. So maybe we'll do that real quick before we wrap up. So let's go Flask shell. And then we want to let's query our user. We'll go u is equal to user query, and we'll just go first. And that'll give us the 1 user that we have, right? See, email. So now we want to check that our check password method is working. So let's go u check password, and then we want to pass a password to it that we want to check. So let's try a wrong one first. Let's go test. And you can see that returned false. So let's run it back again, but let's put in the appropriate password. Okay, so that looks like it's been working then. So to recap, we've created a new user model, and we've added a couple methods to that user model, one to check password, and one to encrypt and set password. We've also created a user that we can use moving forward when we want to integrate authentication. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to be implementing user session functionality, and that'll provide us with a way for users to log in and out of the application and for us to secure the content of our application as well.